Yeah, I mean, I think he kind of sees the writing on the wall, but he also knows he's a little bit out of, doesn't have a whole lot of say in it. I mean, the Phillies are either going to get a package that they like and they'll make a deal, or they're not going to get a package they like, and he can't control that. He can't control if the Rangers or Dodgers or Yankees or Cubs or whoever else is going to, wow the Phillies, and in the words of Ryan Sandberg this winter, because that's really what it's going to take. They're not going to settle for anything. So he doesn't have any control over whether or not another team steps up and gives the Phillies what they want.
Is he unlike Ryan, the Jonathan Papelbon situation? Like, is he telling the Phillies, hey, I want to be traded, do you think? Or does he not care one way or another? Like, hey, if you trade me, I'll go.
No, I think he cares. I think he'd rather, again, play for a team that has a chance to be in the playoffs this year and next year. And, obviously this Phillies team does not have a chance to be in the playoffs this year and next year. So, all things considered, he'd rather go. But he also committed 3 years ago on Saturday to a long-term contract here. If he wanted to, test the free agent owners, he could have done that. And, more credit to him for doing that. I mean, he was very loyal to the organization in doing that. But the Phillies know that, too. And I think they would like to do right by him and give him what he wants. But, he's also taken the very politically correct stance here. He knows the Phillies have been good to him, so he's not going to come out and be like Papelbon and complain. But yeah, I mean, you can read between the lines. He'd obviously prefer, if he had the choice, to pitch for a contender.
Ryan Lawrence, Philadelphia Daily News. The Phillies off tonight, by the way. And a lot of people speculated beforehand that he may have been hurt or that, that his value was going down. I didn't, obviously this guy's Cole Hamels. He's been an MVP of the World Series, the National Championship Series. I think tons of teams would love to have him. But did that game on Saturday make one of these teams have to be more aggressive? Did that do anything to change, in your opinion, his value or any of these other teams' interest in him?
I would say no. I would say it's similar to the two starts before that. Where people thought, oh my God, people aren't going to be interested in him now. I mean, real live media people with a lot of following say silly things like that. But yeah, I mean, you're not going to take one or two starts and make a rash judgment, an important decision with your franchise based on one or two games. So just as that start in San Francisco 2 weeks ago Friday, it was alarming, but he wasn't hurt, so it wasn't going to affect things up one way or the other. Same thing this Saturday. Although I will say, Saturday everybody in baseball knew that all eyes were on him, and he did, perform obviously in a very. So yeah, I mean, if he could perform in the sector that he did on Saturday at Wrigley Field, I think it didn't hurt him in terms of teams that want him to perform in October. But again, he's performed in October. If you pick up the Daily News today, I was asked to list the top 5 games in Cole Hamels' career, and when I came up with that list of 5, 4 of those 5 were playoff games. So, I mean, that just goes to show you this guy has a track record, regardless of what happened in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think a lot of people, Ryan, and see if you agree with me, if you don't like Cole Hamels, 2009 is stuck in your head. If you're a fan of Cole Hamels, you probably remember 2008 and just about everything else a little bit more fondly.
Yeah, and there are also people that just don't understand in the last 5 years he's been one of the top 5, 10 pitchers in baseball easily. And because there's a lot of people that just look at wins, and any of us that look a little bit deeper know that Cole Hamels can't control wins when he pitches for a team that doesn't score a whole lot. So yeah, again, I wrote a big story on him in May, and the numbers that I had in that story kind of told you everything you need to know about how good he is. And you're right. I mean, there is that perception in 2009, but the other thing is, people don't realize Cliff Lee had his struggles before he got here. He did that early in his career in Cleveland, and he came here as a finished product. Cole Hamels wasn't a finished product. Cole Hamels was a young player that came to the Phillies. I think he was 22 or 23 when he made his debut. Everybody has growing pains. Every single player has growing pains. Even Mike Trout, when he first came up to the big league, he was up for a half season, and he was okay. And it was the next year that he took off. So, not everybody has their growing pains right away. Sometimes it's the second or third year they're in the big league. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there is that perception out there that, that season just kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste in Phillies fans' mouth. But it's just crazy to me that he was the guy that was probably as responsible as anybody else for, ending the 25-year drought without a championship parade in this city for what he did in October in 2008, and people forgot that because of what he did in 2009. And then there's a large portion of people just don't appreciate what he's done since 2010, which is for 5.5 years. Again, easily one of the top 10 pitchers in baseball.
I agree. Ryan Lawrence from the Philadelphia Daily News, Philly.com here, 97.3 ESPN. Ryan, you were there. Cole looked different that day, Saturday. I mean, he was throwing 96. I mean, Cole is very good, as you said, but a lot of times he doesn't seem like he's got that guy to have that no-hitter stuff. But 13 strikeouts. But I thought the way he was popping the gun, it just seemed like he had a little extra that day. Was that one of – I mean, he throws a no-hitter, so it's got to be. But was that one of the best you've ever seen him perform?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said, I put together a top 5 list of his career starts, and, I put the no-hitter in there. That was the only regular season game I had in my list. And, I mean, he was just flat-out dominant. And I think it helps. A couple of things I think were in play. He had a decent amount of rest in the last month, really, when you consider the All-Star break. I think they gave him, he started the Friday before the All-Star break, and then he didn't come back until the following Sunday. So he had more than a week rest there. And then he had an extra day at least before this start on Saturday. And then you also, have the fact that he struggled in the start. And I think that got him to fine-tune his game. It reminded me of, I wrote in my story today in the Daily News, of Halladay. Halladay had his worst start in that 2010 season when he won the Cy Young, when he was easily the best pitcher in baseball. He had his worst start in the game before the perfect game. So I think a lot of times when guys have those bad starts, it gets them to go and really fine-tune what they're doing and take that bullpen in between starts and make sure that they're doing everything. So, I think it was just the perfect storm of, he was strong, he was healthy, he was rested, and he was motivated to end that two-start slump, I guess you can call it, even though 2 starts doesn't really concentrate. But anyway, I think it was just everything came together for him. And, his fastball was popping. And his curveball, that was probably the most underrated thing. That 5 years ago, I think he was going to get rid of his curveball, and his curveball was just ridiculously good on Saturday. Yeah,
he had a lot of that get me over to start you off curveball to start the game, to start a lot of the hitters off. He was really brilliant. But this team is obviously, 20-some games under 500. It's been a terrible season. They came out and said 2017, maybe 2018. Cole's got 3 years left on that deal. Do you, Ryan, find any positives in keeping him around?
And actually, it could be 4 years because it was an option year or vesting year. I mean, so you could keep him for as many as 4 more years after this year. I'll say what I said to another writer when we debate this all the time. And yesterday I said that you can make the argument for it. And that's about what I'll say. You can make the argument for him. I'm not saying it's a good argument, but you can make that argument. And I'll just outline what you would do if you're making that argument, and that's you could say that the Phillies are a big market team that should be able to turn things around quicker than other teams because they have the financial wherewithal to do that. Now, we all know the best way to build a team is through the farm system, and that's still a work in progress. They do have some down there. It's probably in a lot better shape than it was 2-3 years ago, but they still need more down there. And that said, they do have the money. That Comcast TV deal kicks in this offseason. They can spend. They can go out. So if J.P. Crawford comes up at some point next year and then Roman Quinn and you have Nola, you can complement those guys by going and signing an ace on the free agent market. You can go and sign a Cuban outfielder to add power to an outfield that's lacking in it. So they can turn this around quick. And, they can turn it around in that window when Hamels is around the next 3 or 4 years. But you also have to weigh the fact that Hamels is getting older with each year. And just that's the great unknown. We don't know if he's going to hold up until his age 34, 35 years. It seems like a lot of left-handers have had a better track record of holding up. Cliff Lee would be maybe an exception. But, Cole Hamels' motion is very fluid. So I wouldn't be shocked if, he's 37 and still pitching very well. But, again, we don't know whether that's going to be the case. He could break down like Roy Halladay. He could break down like many guys have. Tom Glavine's a guy that pitched deep into his career. So he's a left-hander that did it. But, that's really the great unknown. So you can make the argument, but I'm not sure how great of an argument it is.
Well, I'll ask Ryan Lawrence. You've seen now both of Aaron Nola's starts, and, a lot of people think that he might not be a top-of-the-rotation guy, but maybe a good number 2 or a 3 guy. What has stood out in his 2 starts in watching him?
He just goes right at. He just attacks hitters. He's not afraid. He throws strikes, and that's very important. I mean, his pitch count was, I think, 74, I think, going into the 8th inning, something like that. It was just ridiculous. And the Phillies need that. That's a breath of fresh air. They need guys that can go deep into games. And, the more early outs you get, the more, you're inducing ground balls early. This is one of the things that Roy Halladay did so great in his career, and it kind of went under the radar, is that all those years in Toronto, he was such a great ground ball pitcher, and that allowed him to go 8 and 9 innings because he would get ground balls early in at-bats, and, his pitch count would be low. And so, I think that's probably the thing that stood out the most to me with Aaron Nola, is maybe he doesn't have the stuff of a Jacob deGrom or Matt Harvey or some of these other young pitchers, but he's fearless, and he's, again, he's being very economical with his pitches, and that's a very good thing.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, he's an interesting guy because, the Phillies are in this period where they don't really need to rush guys or anything, but he was kind of knocking on the door so hard that they couldn't really keep him down there. So here's a situation where they got this young kid pitching up here on a team that's not going to be very good for a little while now, but I guess you'll at least get to see whether or not what he's made of over the next couple of years to see if he's going to be a top of the rotation guy or more of a middle or back end of the rotation guy.
Yeah, I think he did everything he needed to do in the minor leagues, and I don't think he was rushed at all. I think that they handled it as well as you could handle it. I don't think he really should have been up less than a year since he was drafted. 13 months in the minor league, working his way up from the proper channels, Clearwater and Reading and Lehigh Valley. And the other thing is, I know people think, oh, well, don't start his clock because then he'll be a free agent sooner. But I think that's a little overstated and overplayed when people play that card because, again, you're talking about a big market team, and you look at the landscape of baseball, teams lock up young players if they're good. So, if this guy reaches his potential and is what they expect him to be, the Phillies got the wherewithal to lock him up just like they have done with all their other homegrown players. So, I think that people play that card an awful lot, and I think it's just overstated. Because again, if a guy is good and you're a team that has the wherewithal to spend and to give that kind of contract to lock him up beyond his arbitration years, you're going to do that. So, I think all is well with the Aaron Nola situation.
Yeah, I agree with that too, Rye. And obviously the next guy would be Papelbon. And, last week it sounded like a lot of people thought Papelbon, the Phillies had missed the boat on maybe moving him. The more you wait it, more teams now have closers involved. There's not a lot of contending teams that are looking for closer help. Are the Phillies going to be stuck with Papelbon after Friday?
I think they're going to be – I'll just say that I think they could be stuck regardless, and I don't think that they waited too long. If anything, the longer you wait, the less Papelbon is owed, and the money shrinks, and I think that the money is the biggest stumbling block of all because Major League teams, the way they function right now, is most of them that are smart and the ones that win don't spend a lot on a closer. So I think most of them have hesitated because they don't think spending whatever it is, $12.5, $13 million next year on a closer is the best way for them to allot their dollars. That said, the Phillies can bridge the gap there and throw in money, which I think they're probably going to have to do if they do move him and expect to get a decent prospect back. I think they're going to have to throw in money. But I don't know who needs a closer and who needs it strong enough to make the deal the Phillies want to make, which is to get a decent prospect back and to throw in some money. The Phillies are really going to have to make that dollar figure a pretty strong one, I think, in order to make it happen.
How about Utley? I know that somebody said the Angels might be interested, but I guess my question for you is, if teams are going to take a chance on Utley, wouldn't they have to see him perform and play a little bit? And are the Phillies going to be willing to give him that playing time? They'd already kind of said Hernandez is going to be the guy. How do they fit Utley in? Do they want to say, look, we're going to give you 2 weeks to kind of show everybody? How do you think they play that?
Yeah, well, the first thing is Utley's obviously not going to be moved before Friday's trade deadline because he hasn't played in over a month. You're talking about a guy that would move before, through waivers before September 1st. So, at some point in August, he could be traded. But yeah, for sure, just like with really Aaron Harang, who could also move before September 1st, you're going to need to go see that guy perform, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, in August. And both of those guys have something to prove. I would say Utley more so. Utley really hasn't done anything at all this year. So he needs to perform that he can be a capable bat for a contender. But yeah, there is reason for teams to have interest. He does bring pretty formidable presence to a clubhouse. But yeah, it's huge. He still has to go out there and prove that he can be a piece to help the team, which it's hard to say. Oh yeah, and to answer your other part of the question, yeah, I think the Phillies could give him at bats because their first baseman hasn't necessarily been, crushing the ball, although he had two home runs this weekend. So you can, between those three guys, Hernandez, Utley, and Howard, I think you can kind of split the playing time to where, Utley could still play 4 or 5 games a week.
Should be interesting to see Friday. I know last year was kind of a dud. This year, if it's a dud again, that's probably a bad day for whoever's making the decision. Most people believe it's Pat Gillick who will be the guy making that call. But I guess with Andy here, it does complicate some things a little bit more on how this thing's all working inside the Phillies front office. I guess Ruben's making calls. He's reporting back. Pat's maybe saying yes or no. Andy's kind of doing who knows what.
Yeah, Pat Gillick's run the baseball operation since the end of August, which, we've all reported all along, and he is Ruben Amaro Jr.'s pop. So Pat Gillick is making the decisions here, and Andy McPhail is the one that has to live with those decisions, so obviously he has to stay in this. I'm not sure if it's as strong as he has veto power, because, again, Pat Gillick is the one in charge right now. But, yeah, I don't think it's a contentious thing at all. I think they're all smart baseball people that have been around long enough. Again, particularly Gillick and McPhail. McPhail's probably one more World Series title away from, joining Gillick and Cooperstown, for what he's done in his career, or at least, having a pretty good argument. He actually would be a third-generation Cooperstown guy because both his father, I think his father or uncle, and I know his grandfather is definitely in Cooperstown. So, yeah, just get back to your question. I think this is on Gillick to make the right call. But, hey, if they don't do anything on Friday, I guess I would say I would not be entirely shocked because of that. And maybe, McPhail, maybe they just had him be the one that makes the ultimate decision on a guy like Hamels, especially if they're not getting a great offer. Because, then, again, they're not going to settle on Friday for whatever the best offer is for Hamels. They're going to get what they want.
All right, Ryan Lyons for the Philadelphia Daily News as the Phillies have the night off, and they'll have a little 2-game setup in Canada against the Blue Jays before the trade deadline on Friday. Ryan, always a pleasure, man. Good to catch up with you.
All right, have a good one.